Masculinity Solved, How to Be a Man. Today, you will learn the complete definition of what masculinity is and what it isn't. Because on Instagram and on the internet, there's a lot of confusing information. If you're a man and you want to find the right girlfriend or wife, this video is for you. Let's start with the definition. What is masculinity? Universally attractive behaviors that increase the probability that women want to be with you and other men want to be like you. Now, what is masculinity not? Masculinity is not controlling. It is not dominant. It is not socially uncalibrated. It does not mean being cruel, rude, or violent. It's so funny, Fernanda wrote it, and she added a little E at the end, because my handwriting is a bit of a disaster. That is not masculinity. We look at different behaviors and definitions of those values, or rather personality traits, that you'll find extremely helpful. So let's first look at the communication side. How does masculinity relate to communication with women? A man who is very masculine is, come very close, is radically honest. He sets boundaries very quickly and clearly. He is disagreeable when necessary. And when it's authentic. He's calm, he's serious, he never... By the way, the serious thing, you know that the first date has to be fun and playful. You can't just try to be James Bond. That doesn't work either. But today we're talking about masculinity. He is never made to feel insecure by other people, so other women's words. He takes the initiative, he's generous and kind. Now let's look at the actual behaviors. First, masculinity means you're disciplined. What is discipline? Well, in my book, discipline is how long can you do the right thing in the presence of negative, or rather painful emotions without reward. Now, you could also say that it relates to painful physical sensations. If you're in the gym and you keep working out, even though there's pain, that's physical pain. Again, for how long can you do the right thing in the presence of negative emotions without doing a reward? A man who's not disciplined at all, he may be working on a task and he gives up very quickly because he has no discipline, and his threshold for negative emotions is very low. So he's going to look for dopamine somewhere very quickly because he can't tolerate the absence of a reward. The same is true with dating, by the way. Now, if you do dating properly with dating apps, Instagram, and approaches, it's the same thing. I mean, if you do it well, you can get a reward very, very quickly. But even there, you will have to go through some rejections. How long can you do the right thing, introducing yourself online or in person, in the presence of negative emotions? You feel rejected. That's going to hurt a little bit until you reframe it cognitively and you have the right mindset without an immediate reward. The next characteristic of being a man, it's consistent. That's a lot simpler. It's just how long can you keep doing the same thing? Men who are very consistent are considered masculine. Next, integrity, very important one. How often do your actions match your predictions about your own behavior? These are definitions I came up with. Feel free to give me some alternative definitions. But I think this is a good one. If you have integrity, you basically say you're going to do something and then you'll do it. You say you're going to go and approach somebody and you're going to go and do it. You give your employees, your peers, your quality male friends, your wife, your word that something is going to happen. How often does this match? Now, a man who has a lot of integrity, how often? 100%. A man who has very little integrity, he basically says something, and every single time he says something, something else occurs. That'll be very low integrity. So you want to strive to have a very high congruence between your thoughts, words, and actions. Next, a man who's masculine is brave and courageous. We've all heard it, but what does it mean to be brave and courageous? Well, how much uncertainty can you comfortably live with? That's one way of looking at it. Or how dangerous of an obstacle can you face and still do the right thing? For example, some men might be afraid if a swan runs towards them. Another man might grab it by the neck. If the swan runs towards you and you need to protect your child, some men will run away, the others are going to grab it by the neck. I don't know what type of a man wouldn't grab the swan by the neck, but probably a man who isn't particularly masculine. Now, there are some men who go into war with the absolute certainty of death, and they still do what they believe to be the right thing. Do you protect your family? How dangerous of an obstacle? It's not even how much fear do you feel, because that's rather subjective and you want to measure it at the level of behavior. But brave, courageous means you feel the fear, but you do the right thing anyway. You feel the approaching anxiety, but you do the right thing anyway. Now, again, to everything, there's a technical nature. And we're going to get to that in a couple of minutes, if the severity of the negative emotion, the fear, is so strong, then you might not be able to do it. So you have to have ways to reduce the fear in the moment to be able to do the right thing. Okay? But generally speaking, a man who's very masculine has a lot of bravery, a lot of courage. Therefore, he can deal with a very dangerous obstacle and still do the right thing. A man who's masculine is also decisive. Decisive is how fast can you make decisions, asterisk, without impairing the quality of your decision-making. Now, you could just make a decision within a second, but if the quality of your decisions sucks as a man, that's not good decision-making. In fairness, it's decision-making, but it's not good decision-making. So how fast do you do that? A man who's masculine makes decisions quickly. Now, you could argue that taking time to think things through is fine, but taken to an extreme, if a man is rather indecisive, she asks you, "Where should we go tonight, honey?" And you say, "I don't know." It's rather indecisive and it's a massive turnoff for her, okay? You need to be able to make decisions. You need to be able to gather data quickly. Now, the next one is Anti-Fragile, which is an interesting book that was written. I don't even remember the author, but it's basically this idea that something bad happens to you and it may not even be your fault. It may or may not even be your fault. Then, how fast do you get how much better after facing a problem? Because there is a video that I saw of Andrew Huberman talking about this. There's basically winners and losers in life. Winners take the negative thing that happened to them and transform it into positive energy, or rather action. Losers, they let it drive them into apathy, and I'm paraphrasing. Now, if you're anti-fragile, you get better, something negative happens. Your dog dies, for example, which is obviously really painful. I've never had a dog, but I've had family members who had dogs, so I see how important that is. Beautiful creatures. So that affects you. And then how fast do you rebound? And then do you get a lot better from it? Do you go to the same level or do you get worse? Well, if you get a lot better and it makes you stronger, you act better, you treat the people around, it makes you kinder, it makes you harder working, it makes you act even more responsible as a man, well, that's fantastic. How much better and how fast do you get better? Next one, certainty. How certain are you? How confident are you as a man? And you could simply describe that as an emotional state of belief, or how confident are you that X, Y, Z will happen? You could define it as an absence of doubt. Or Tony Robbins has the belief that I will find a way or I will make a way. Maybe the single most important characteristic out of all of masculinity is certainty. Being able to create certainty within yourself, neurological, physiological certainty. And yes, you could say, I just have. How would you define a confident guy on the date? He's very confident that he's going to get a good outcome. Or he's very confident that even if it doesn't work out with her, he's going to find an amazing person. So that is a good way of looking at it. But we also have to look at certainty as a physiological state. You feel fucking great about yourself. That is also certainty. How do you create that? Well, I have a video on my YouTube channel here called Inner Game Mastery. It's where I'm standing on top of a mountain. Go and watch that. Next, hardworking. How do you define how hardworking a man is? Well, how many hours do you spend productively per week? That's it. Because when we talk about hard work, it's not actually how hard you work. We're referring to long. The reason we call it hard work is because we sometimes have negative emotions while we're working, and therefore we call it hard. But actually, it doesn't matter how hard we work. It just matters how long we work. And ultimately, that even doesn't matter if we're not being productive. So you need long work and actual productive output. A man who's more masculine is more harder working. Do you work 4 hours a day or 14 hours a day? Next one, physically strong. Oh, my casual little spelling mistake here because Fernandina wrote this down. I wouldn't say that I wouldn't have any. I'm borderline dyslexic as well, so it's fine. And I wouldn't be able to write it nearly as nicely, so thank you, babe. Thank you, Fernandina, if you're watching this, for writing this down. Physically strong. Now, physically strong is always relative. Look at the evolution of bodybuilders over the years. You can clearly see how men have grown into these Pokemons over the years. So it's always relative. But basically, there's a couple of objective characteristics we can look at: your body fat, your lean muscle mass, your agility, your flexibility, your VO2 max, your bloods, your HRV, etc. Next, executor versus thinker. Men who are masculine, they take action. They don't just ponder. I like thinking. I was preparing this on a Zoom call first. I was writing it down and I said, what is masculinity? What is masculinity not? And how do you define it in opposition? By looking at femininity, for example. Maybe we'll touch on this later today in opposition. I like thinking. I like concepts. I like philosophy. You probably know that as well. But how much do you take action? That's very important. So, how much time do you let pass before you act on ideas with discipline? Okay, discipline, doing the right thing over a sustained period of time. Not just having an idea, doing something once, and then moving on. No, you want to let very little time pass by. Tony Robbins says the second you have a great idea, you got to act on it immediately. How much of your time throughout the day is spent in action versus thinking? Same with dating, by the way. How much more dating content do you want to watch until you start taking action? How many more videos do you want to consume passively? If you want to find the right girlfriend or wife, eventually you'll have to make a decision and say, I will no longer keep passively consuming videos on the internet. I will start taking action. Because consuming this is nice, but if you don't translate this into action, it's basically worthless. Because I want you to get the outcome. For you to have the outcome, you need actions. Yes, this changes your mindset, so it drastically increases the probability that you will act in the right way because now you have a North Star to aim towards. But it still has to translate into action. Execution trumps knowledge any day of the week. That's what Tony says. So, important. Next one, leadership. There's many different definitions of leadership, but ultimately, if we just look at leadership, and then we can look at a couple of other defining characteristics of good leadership underneath, how often do you give versus receive orders and suggestions? Now, in a relationship, you don't give orders, but you make suggestions. How much leadership is there? And I'm not one of those guys who says that man is the leader 100% of the time. I think most of the time you're going to be the leader in a relationship, but it just means saying, let's do this. Let's go here. Fun and playful. Again, it is not controlling, dominating, socially uncalibrated, cruel, rude, or violent. That's not what masculinity is. But it is making suggestions. Now, good leadership is servant leadership. It's the king. And there's a lot of weird videos on the internet of people calling themselves kings, right? That's not what I'm talking about. But the ancient archetype of the benevolent king, he has generative energy. It's service. How do you define service? Whether somebody's very servant or not. How often do you act to meet your own needs as opposed to somebody else's? What's the ratio? That's service. A good leader serves or works to serve other people. It's not just selfish. Selfish behavior driven to its extreme will absolutely destroy you in the end, and you're not that type of man anyway. Next, a good masculine man is a strategist. He does not just take action. He seeks counsel, reflects, plans, gathers data, and he changes his approach. Something isn't working, you change it. You try another thing, You will really only fail if you give up. That's it. Even if you die, you didn't fail, you just died. And guess what? In which case, you wouldn't even care about it anymore at all. So as long as you keep going, you'll be fine. Next, you're a protector. You protect. How often, now what's the definition of being a good protector? Very interesting. How often do you let your loved ones get hurt? Or how severely do you let your loved ones get hurt? Because if you're the worst protector in the world, they're all dead. If you're the best protector in the world, nothing, not even a scratch, would ever come to them. Interesting definition, right? So protecting doesn't just mean, oh, I'm going to walk down a dangerous street and then I'll engage in a fight. Like I'll protect if necessary. It also means strategizing to not even go into the street in the first place. That doesn't mean that life doesn't happen, but it's a masculine trait. It's definitely one of those. Next, you're a visionary. You communicate a detailed and compelling vision, you communicate a detailed and compelling description, wouldn't want to have a circular definition now, would we, of a better tomorrow which people buy into. That is your job as a man, as a leader, if you're masculine, for your family, for your friend circle, for your work. You need to communicate a tomorrow that is better than today, as detailed as possible, with the values or the necessary whys, finding every individual whys to get them to buy into that vision. Next, you're non-emotional. Because if we think about men who are very non-masculine, very weak, if you will, they're very emotional. They have an emotional inkling and they act on it immediately. Definition of non-emotional. How bad can your emotions be before you can no longer do the right thing? Pain tolerance. Very similar to discipline, if you will, but it's in essence that. How bad, how severe can your negative emotions be before you start acting in a harmful way towards yourself or towards other people? If you think about that, right? Whenever you're emotional, you start treating people badly, you start gambling, you start drinking alcohol. Very important. And by the way, sometimes you have to understand, and this is where it gets really interesting, it's not just about not being emotional. You need to meet your need and then the symptoms subside. Oftentimes, these emotions, anger, sadness, loneliness, they're just tragic expressions of unmet needs. If your need for love and connection isn't met, yeah, we all get emotional. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't just feel emotions, because that is one of the hallmarks of masculinity. Ignore your emotions. Do the right thing anyway. Yeah, but if you're intelligent, you also understand human psychology. And you understand that if your needs aren't met, you will feel very strong negative emotions. And then just trying to tell yourself that you shouldn't feel those emotions is cruel. It defeats your very humanity as a man because you also have needs. Meet the need and the symptoms aside. Did you ever notice that the times you suffer the least is when you're around quality male friends? If you're around people who really love you, don't you feel amazing? The times you suffered most in life were when you were alone at home, about to make love to yourself, to adult internet videos. Next, you're a master of state, your mental and emotional state. You learn to change how you feel. How often do you make yourself feel like doing it? You know how we say just do the right thing anyway? That's a hallmark of being a man. You ignore negative emotions, fine. But what if the negative emotions are really bad? They're so bad that you actually, you just can't. Whether it's sadness, or fear, or stress, or anger, or you feel depressed, you need to make yourself feel like doing it. There's tools for it. I have some of those videos here on my YouTube channel. Go check them out. For example, the one Inner Game Master. Go check those out. Very, very important. You make yourself feel like doing it. You change your emotions first, and then the right actions result from it. Sometimes you just need to ignore your emotions. Sometimes you need to change your emotions first to be able to do the right thing. Because we've all had it where you want to go and talk to a woman, but there is approach anxiety. You could call it negative momentum. There's different ways to look at it, but there is an emotion that is preventing you from doing it in the moment. So don't just tell me it's just about ignoring your emotions. That is a rather unintelligent definition of masculinity. Next one. Masculinity means you're a ritualist. You understand the power of habits. Actions you take repeatedly that give you desired emotions or objective outcomes. The gym, sauna, ice bath, meditation, coffee, whatever it is for you. You understand the church for some people. Prayer. You understand the power of those, and they are an integral part of your week. Next, you are resourceful. Interesting definition that I came up with. How fast can you gather emotional or physical resources to achieve a goal? Because we think of being resourceful just as having money. Yeah, and if you're a little bit more abundant in resources, fantastic, great, that's good for you. But if you don't have those, or if you're threatened to have them taken away from you, you need to become resourceful, which also relates to your emotional capacity to do the right things necessary to then gather physical resources to put yourself out there again, to achieve a certain goal. Very important. You need to get the emotional resources as well as the physical resources. And it's funny, Tony Robbins says the ultimate resource is actually just the ability to manage your own mental and your emotional state. Because if you're in the right state, if you can turn on, remember what I said, the most important hallmark is certainty. The faster you can turn on certainty that you can achieve an outcome, absolute faith, absolute belief that you're going to be able to make it happen, you will naturally start moving in the right directions. You'll call the right people, you'll do research on ChatGPT, but only if the mental and the emotional certainty is present in your body right now. Next, sacrifice. How much of yourself, what are you or not, how much of yourself are you willing to give up to serve a greater good? If it's nothing, you're 100% selfish. I don't believe we're 100% selfish or selfless. We definitely have selfish needs as a human being. Of course, everybody has them. But are you at least making a conscious effort to serve more? than just yourself, and you're willing to give up a bit about yourself? Are you willing to count your calories to be a better father? Are you willing to overcome your fear, your approach anxiety, fear of humiliation, fear of rejection, to be a better role model? How on earth are you going to be the best father in the world if you can't even overcome your fear of rejection? If you can't even build a dating profile? Next, kindness. Very important, because mature masculinity also includes kindness. Now, kindness does not mean being soft and telling people what they want to hear in the moment. It is, how often do you act in a way that increases other people's well-being in the long term? Because if I tell you, I told my friend that the other day, we were playing airsoft, I told him that he's gotten fat. And I grabbed his belly fat and I wiggled it around the group a little bit. Little bit of male humiliation. It comes from a loving place. He told me the next time, 3 weeks later, when we went playing airsoft, hey, cut out sugar. You don't need to cut out sugar, by the way, to lose weight. You can just be in a caloric deficit. But anyway, he's taken the right actions. I gained a little bit of weight throughout the pandemic because I was in a relationship with a friend. I was like, oh, I'm cool, I'm fine. My friend gifted me the same weight loss book 2 years in a row. He called me a white whale. We went swimming. He's like, do the whale noise. Right? That's what men do. It's kindness. Kindness sometimes means being loving and giving the person a hug and being fully present. And sometimes it means being present, but a little bit more tough love. That's what it means to be a man. And if you look at femininity, it's usually understood as soft, a little bit more emotional, playful, loving, caring, nurturing. Feminine is not negative. It brings you into the present moment, because another thing, I mean, it's in here, right? The idea of vision. It's long-term future focused, but having the right woman by your side makes you enjoy this journey, because what good is it to achieve outcomes if we can't enjoy the journey along the way? I hope this was helpful. Share this with somebody who needs a bit more masculinity in his communication. Go take some action.